The Southern Cross, an Australian-flagged freighter, was running a routine transit through a notorious stretch of ocean. The crew had been up twice during the night for watch rotations, trading yawns and coffee. None of them expected violence. None of them expected the sound of engines that didn't belong to cargo tugs or fishing boats. On the bridge, the lookout's binoculars locked onto movement. 4 fast-moving skiffs cutting wakes towards the freighter, engines howling. And then they saw the weapons. Not the typical single-style rifles you hear about in cable news, but a scatter of different threats. A heavy Dishik heavy machine gun mounted on one bow, a battered Fenn Foul poking from another skiff, a handful of men carrying pump-action shotties and pistols, and an RPG tube strapped along the rail of a 4th craft. These attackers weren't improvising. They were equipped from multiple arsenals. The attackers executed a textbook pincer. 2 skiffs swung to the stern, 2 hugged the bow, and 1 held back in overwatch with the dish trained to spray any response. Men shouted in harsh, clipped languages, and then gunfire hammered the freighter's superstructure. Windows shattered, electronics blinked. The crew hit the Citadel alarm and vanished behind thick steel doors, locking themselves into the fortified safe room. The ship was sealed, and the attackers began to throw grapnels and ladders. A distress call went out. Automatic. Urgent. Pirate boarding in progress. Coordinates. Latitude and longitude. Immediate assistance required. The signal punched into the mesh of international maritime monitoring feeds. 30 nautical miles away, HMAS Toowoomba, an Anzac-class frigate of the Royal Australian Navy, was sweeping the lanes on routine patrol. The operations room lit up when the Mayday signal came through. The commander looked at the feed for half a second and said, "Bring her about." The Toowoomba's gas turbines bellowed. Deck crews iced their positions. The 25mm Bushmaster rotated into place. The ship accelerated, the bow raising its wake. Rib teams readied themselves. A boarding party combined sailors from force protection and clearance diving teams, not just infantry, but specialists trained in close quarters combat and boarding and ship clearing. The Toowoomba bore down on the ambush, her loudspeakers thundering a single instruction: stop engines, drop weapons, sailors stay clear. The pirates laughed. One of them fired an M79-style single-shot grenade launcher into the air, the round clanging off a container, sending a plume of rust into the sky. That laugh was the last sound they heard before their plan started to unravel in real time. The frigate's first volley wasn't meant to kill. It was calculated to end the fight. The Bushmaster fired a round that slammed into the water ahead of the lead skiff, sending geysers of spray waist-high. The shock made the skiff swing. The dish crew tried to track the Toowoomba, but the rounds fell harmlessly into the sea. The pirates' nerves cracked, and then began the actual show. From the starboard well, 2 black ribs jumped off the side of the frigate and vanished into the swell. The boarding teams crouched low, compact silhouettes against the spray, weapons stacked and ready. Fenn Minimus, M4 pattern rifles, breaching tools, flex cuffs, and even non-lethal options strapped to their rigs. The Australians weren't just charging in. This was choreography, honed in drills, now unfolding in real combat. The first rib slammed into a skiff that was trying to cut under the freighter's stern. A bow gunner on the rib belted a short, precise burst from an M240 into the pirate boat's engine compartment. The motor coughed smoke and died. 2 men thrashed wildly, clutching at fuel cans and floating debris, while their comrades tried to haul them back on board. But the Australians pressed the advantage. A sailor on the rib lobbed a stun grenade into the disabled skiff. It detonated with a violent crack and flash of white light, stunning the men who had managed to stay upright. One pirate dropped his weapon instantly, hands shaking in the air. Another, clutching an old Fenn rifle, hesitated too long and was pinned to the deck in seconds by controlled fire that left him writhing but still alive. Meanwhile, the second rib swung wide to block off escape. Its engine howled as it carved through the swell, sliding across the pirate formation like a blade closing a trap. The skiff it intercepted was trying to peel away toward the mothership, but the Australians cut them off in open water. The rib's bow rammed across the pirate boat's path, forcing the skiff into a hard turn that nearly capsized it. Sailors opened fire into the air and over the bow, tracer lines carving warnings inches from the fleeing men. It was a message. There would be no retreat today. Within minutes, both pirate boats were neutralized, one disabled and boarded, the other boxed in and forced to surrender. Survivors were zip-tied where they stood, their weapons kicked into the sea, their shouts drowned out by the roar of the rib engines as the Australians consolidated control. For the crew still locked in the freighter Citadel, the muffled rattle of gunfire and the sudden silence afterward told them everything. The fight outside had ended, and it hadn't gone the pirates' way. This is where things get ugly. A pirate on the disabled craft reached for a fin foul and fired a lucky round. It hit a rigging and shrapnel sprayed the rib's hull. The Australian boarding team didn't hesitate. 2 sailors rolled out of the rib and hit the pirate point blank with controlled fire. The skiff was swamped. The remaining men tossed their weapons overboard and surrendered. Flashbangs popped, a white thunder that sent everyone reeling, followed by silence. At the same time, the frigate's stern guns were engaging. A 57mm round detonated in the water between a skiff and the freighter, a steel. The Dish's crew, suddenly exposed and outmatched, took a direct line from a remote auto tracker and were suppressed into silence. One heavy crewman toppled, and the Dish fell silent. But the most unexpected part was what the boarding teams found. They expected fuel cans and scuffed rifles. Instead, they uncovered a hard cache, stamped metal crates of rounds, sealed belts of 12.7mm ammunition for the Dish, an intact G3 rifle with the military serial number still legible, several flares of Chinese brand rocket propellant, and a weathered sat phone crammed with coordinates and waypoint lists. None of this was street-level improv. This was at the supply chain level. Someone had been arming these crews carefully, exactly to run deep-sea ambushes. But the situation takes an even darker turn. The pirates weren't a single frightened crew. They were a node in a much larger chain. The sat phone logs showed scheduled rendezvous points farther offshore, suggesting motherships that could refuel and rearm these strike teams. That meant that this morning's ambush was not an isolated sting. It was part of a structured, repeatable threat pipeline. Whoever funded or organized it was counting on the idea that ships wouldn't fight back effectively. They had miscalculated. Inside the Citadel, the sailors had listened to the whole thing. The bark of orders, the staccato of machine gun fire, the heavy thud of explosions far above the steel. One junior engineer whispered into a handheld radio, "I thought this was the end." A senior mate squeezed his hand, eyes hollow with relief as the thumping slowed, and the radio relay went from chaos to the calm voice of the boarding team. "Deck secure. Hold tight. We have control." The casualties among the pirates were limited but decisive. 2 dead, a handful wounded, the rest captured. The Australians exercised restraint where possible. Immediate threat met with lethal force, but every man taken alive was treated and processed according to the law. Medical staff worked quickly, wound dressing, IVs, temperature checks. The captured men were photographed, tagged, and given basic humanitarian care while under guard. In the open sea, life returned to a fragile calm. The Southern Cross resumed her transit, and the frigate's crew remained on station for hours more, scanning the empty horizon.